Well, we're in this series. It's our fall series called Behold Jesus. And here's the thesis, the premise of this entire series is you and I, we become what we behold. We do. Whatever we put in front of our eyes, whatever we keep looking at, whatever things are just kind of the focus of our attention, we drift that direction. So if you're drifting in the direction of attaining material wealth and getting that next status in your level at your company or corporation, you're probably placing that in front of you. That's the thing that you're beholding, and you're becoming that, and everything that goes along with that. Whatever we behold, we become. And as a Jesus follower, here's what should be true of you and true of me, is we should be enamored, in love, amazed by Jesus. And that should be the thing that has our gaze. The thing that fills our attention should be the one who died on the cross for us. And if we keep our eyes on Jesus, if we keep looking to Jesus, we're going to become more like Jesus. It's going to drift in that direction. Does that make sense? That's so key, friends. But that transformation that Jesus is calling us to, that becoming like Jesus that he's calling us to, that sometimes doesn't happen so easily, does it? And I think Pastor Jeremy kind of punched us a little in the mouth last week, if I can say that. He kind of challenged us, guys, we say we want to be a place where heaven and Henderson meet. We want this place to be a place where heaven comes to Henderson, right? And Henderson comes to heaven. But is that the experience in this place? Are we really committed to really following Jesus and being transformed by him? And he tells this story about what happened in the cafe here and how the person that was serving says, well, y'all are kind of rude, and ouch, that's tough. I was so thankful for that word, but that's hard to hear. The question is, how do we follow Jesus in the mundane, in the Starbucks line, on the freeway, on the 215? The 215 is the most annoying freeway in the entire city. They're just you know what, it's going too well. Let's destroy it all and start over. What are we doing, right, with the 215? But that's what's coming out, right? When we're in traffic, does Jesus change us in the mundane? That was a great word yesterday, or last week. Great word. And I think when things like this week happen, when events that are shocking and horrible, man, what's coming out of us? Man, what was on social media this week was horrible. The things that we saw, the things that were said, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. What come out of my heart? What come out of my mouth, right? It's this tactic of the enemy to always make it's the other person that's really got the problem. It's the other people that really need to get it right. And that's the tactic, because then the spotlight's off of us. And can I just say something pastorally in this moment? I think as much as we are tempted, and you might be tempted, and everyone is tempted on all sides of this to be pointing fingers, can we just realize I can't really change anybody else? There's only one person that I really need to be thinking about, and that's me. Am I really walking with Jesus? Do I have a blind spot that this moment is revealing on whatever side you are? And all this happened. And that's the Jesus way, He was without sin cast the first stone. Man, grace is about what I need to receive in this moment. Man, I need Jesus. Stop thinking about everything else. And Lord, what is it that you're doing in me? So I think that another thing that this week kind of does, and maybe this is the pessimist in me. I'm more normally an optimist, but man, it's hard to be some days, right? And you think about this moment, and you just think, man, how can we change this world? How does this world change? And I think sometimes the enemy's yeah, you're right. You can't do anything, Brad. It's so dark. You'll never change minds. I mean, people who try, they get killed. People who are out there doing whatever. I mean, and all those things. And I was thinking, I didn't say this in the first service, but I mentioned on Facebook, I didn't watch many of Charlie Kirk's videos, but there was another guy that I really like because he's more in my wheelhouse, which is Wes Huff. You guys ever follow him, right? And he was on the Rogan podcast, and that really was an amazing podcast if you haven't checked it out. But I listened to what he said about Charlie Kirk, and I was thinking about this young man. He's similar in age. He's an apologist, preaches and does a lot more of the stuff that I'm more trained in, and he's in Canada. And he was talking about his own fear about now being public and going on campuses and debating and dialoguing. right? And you can think about that. And I'm a pastor, and at any moment someone could come in here. How many shootings happen? You guys hear me, right? I don't need to go down that road, right? But man, what about how do we change this world? How do we make a difference? And I think you can get really discouraged. You can think, man, there's no way. And I think that's exactly what the enemy is after. So we do what Jeremy was preaching. We kind of keep our faith to ourselves. We kind of like, you know what? I don't know how to, help anyone else come to Jesus. I'm not going to talk about Jesus much. I'm going to make my Christianity kind of my private thing. I'm going to go to my church. I'm going to talk to my kids and my family, but I'm really not going to worry about the rest of the world because I can't change it. It's too dark anyway. It's too overwhelming. There's nothing I can do. And maybe I'll throw a couple posts on Facebook out there. I don't know what you do, right? But that's about it. And so at that moment, I think that's exactly the tactic. And so I want to help us today with this. I'm not going to talk about the world. I'm going to talk about my world. I'm gonna challenge us not to say, look, because it's so bad in the world, so bad in the country, I don't know what to do. I'm gonna say, look, that might be true, but we're not responsible for that world. We're responsible for our world. Can I get an amen to that? Amen. There are people that need to see Jesus in you and in me. And I want to talk about our hometown. And I love the fact that I hear about revivals happening all over this country and places. But guys, I want a revival in Henderson. I want a revival here. And I want to talk about Henderson. I want to talk about my hometown. This is where I grew up. I told you guys that before. I got here when I was 3 years old in 1978 or 9, I think, whenever my parents moved us here. I don't know any other place than Henderson, Nevada. This is my hometown. And guys, can I say, it's your hometown too. You might hate it here. I'm like, I can't wait to move out of here. Guys, can I just tell you, can you just bloom where you're planted right now? Can we build gardens and plant gardens and build houses in Babylon here? Right? We talked about that. Guys, Henderson needs to feel your embrace. Love this city as long as God has you here. This is my hometown. I've climbed every mountain. I've ridden on every dirt trail. I've caught every lizard and snake. And I've actually even been in abandoned mines, which is probably not smart at all. My parents didn't know I was doing that when I was little. But I've been all over this city. I've been all over these hills. I love these people. I want to talk about Jesus' hometown for a minute because Jesus ministered in his hometown also. And I want to see something that happens in Jesus' hometown for a minute that I think is so powerful. Because there's a hometown that you and I need to minister to. This is in Luke chapter 4. And it says in Nazareth, he went to Nazareth where he had been brought up. I know we don't have much on the childhood of Jesus. I wish we did. We have some apocryphal literature that's not true, some fanciful stories and legends about Jesus. One's called the Gospel of the Infancy of Thomas, which is really interesting. And I won't get into that rabbit trail, but I'd really like to. It's really fascinating, but it's not true. People have always speculated, what did Jesus do as a kid? We don't know much, right? We have just a little snapshot of when he's 12 and at Jerusalem. That's about it. But what we know is he grew up in Nazareth. He grew up in this place. It's a little sleepy town of about 500 people. It's in Galilee. It's in the north. Not very not much notary from there. In fact, people thought Nazareth was, like Nathanael said, what can come out of that place? Like Pahrump. Like what's going to come out of Pahrump, right? Not much, right? That's kind of Nazareth. Sorry, Pahrumpians, if you're watching online. All right. So he's in this little sleepy town, and he's going there with his disciples now. It says, and on the Sabbath day, he went to the synagogue. This is his childhood synagogue. Imagine that. Jesus went to a synagogue every Saturday. And he sat under a rabbi, and he read the Torah, and he memorized like all the other boys and girls. And so he's at this hometown, this familiar setting where he'd grown up, and now he's a rabbi. He's identified as a rabbi. He's got disciples. And so he's visiting that day. And so they say, you know what? Let's let him read today. And so the text says that he, as was his custom, he stood up to read. So they gave him this Torah scroll, the scroll of Isaiah. It would have been unrolled. And so I want you to picture that, Jesus, like you're a rabbi now. You've been a part of this your whole life. Now you're going to read today. So they give him the scroll of Isaiah, and he unrolls it. And he finds this place. We know it's Isaiah 61. He finds that text, and he reads, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. And he has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners." I'm gonna pause. This word, freedom, in the Greek is the word aphesis. Aphesis. And it's the word for release. In fact, it's probable that he's reading a Greek translation because of the way Luke records this. It's probable that he's reading a Greek translation of Isaiah 61. And so when he gets to this Greek word aphesis, it's the word release. It's the word that would be translated in other places, forgiveness or forgiven, depending on the syntax. And so it's this idea of he has sent me to release, to forgive, to let freedom happen for the prisoner. In every other place in the Gospel of Luke where this word shows up, as I said, it's translated freedom. And a lot of times we're kind of like, well, it's translated forgiveness. How does the word forgiveness relate to the word release? Because I don't normally think about being like released from sins. I usually think of being forgiven from sins. Like in the Lord's Prayer, right? Forgive us this day our daily, debts, right? As we forgive those who sin against us, right? Forgive us our daily sins, right? Our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. But that's actually kind of a problem. With our theology, we kind of only associate sin with this idea of like this ledger of crimes or things I've done wrong that's like in this like category. And it's like, and maybe what I need is like God's magic eraser to erase all that stuff, right? So that I no longer have that sin. It's kind of like that feeling of almost like a legal idea, right? But really, maybe a more accurate idea of thinking of sins, instead of this like legal thing, as feel this weight of debt on your shoulders. And what you need, just like if you've had a really, really bad season and you've gotten way into debt and you feel the crushing oppression of that debt, you need what? Release from that debt, right? Maybe you're at a season right now where your Discover card is charged to the max and you're actually using another card to pay that card, or you got another bill and another thing, and it feels oppressive. The debt feels pressure and oppressive. That's aphesis, release. Have you ever had someone pay off a debt for you? Would you like someone to pay off a debt for you? Right. Okay, yeah, right. And how that would feel. But look what else he says. He's reading through Isaiah. He has sent me to proclaim freedom or release for the prisoner and recovery for the sight of the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Jesus is reading this text in Isaiah that's prophesying about the Messiah in his hometown, and he's reading this commission. This is the commission of Jesus. This is what he's commissioned to do. He's given a ministry of release and recovery, to set people free from their oppression and their bondage of sin, but not just set people free, but also help them recover. How many of us don't just need to be set free from sin, but we need to be taught how to recover from sin? Are you hearing me this morning? Not just, hey, thankful that I have a clean ledger, right? But how do I not get it dirty again, right? You hearing what I'm trying to say? I don't want just to be released. I also want to be recovered. I don't want to just be forgiven. I also want to learn how to walk in freedom. Do you see that two sides here? I don't want to just be forgiven. I also need to learn how to walk in freedom. Maybe there's things in your life and there's oppression that sin has brought into your life. Maybe there are relationships that you know are destroyed because of choices that you've made or other people have made. The oppression and the weight of that sin has just hurt those relationships. And you come and you find Jesus, And you're like, I'm so thankful that I've been forgiven, but I also now need to know how to make amends. I need to know how to walk in freedom so that I don't continue that pattern. I want to have that broken over me, not just the wages of sin, but I also want to get rid of the presence of sin. Are you hearing me this morning? I don't want to walk that way anymore. It's recovery and release. It's help and healing. As we said a couple of weeks ago, our church needs to be a place where it's triage and training. Okay. And so Jesus reads this commission in his hometown, and then he does something super interesting. He stops mid-verse. I'm not going to get into why today, but he stops mid-verse. And then he rolls up the scroll, and he sits down. It's like this mic drop moment before mics were invented. Everyone's staring at him. It says the eyes of the entire synagogue were fastened on him. And then he says, today, the scripture is fulfilled in your hearing. This is about me. Isaiah was writing about me. I wonder what that felt like in that synagogue that morning. People are starting to look at themselves like, are you kidding me? You're Joseph and Mary's kid. Like, you ran around here, I wiped your nose when you're all this stuff, right? What do you mean this is about you, right? And it doesn't actually go well. Actually, the whole place kind of turns on him and they try to throw him off a cliff. I mean, literally, like, it doesn't go well for Jesus, right? But guys, this is so powerful. Jesus made it clear, and before he went anywhere else, he went to his hometown, and he let that hometown crowd know, guys, this is my ministry. I have a ministry of recovery and release. I want to help people be released, and I want to help them recover. I want to show people that they're not going to just find forgiveness, they're also going to find freedom. And in the very next chapter, we actually see this get played out in chapter 5. So I want to look at this story. It's a beautiful story. And you're going to see this ministry, and we're going to see where we fit in the story. So look at chapter 5. It says, so he's now back in Capernaum, which is a little ways away from Nazareth. He's down right on the shore of Galilee, right on the shore of the sea. It's Peter's hometown. And so one day, Jesus is teaching, and the Pharisees and the teachers of law are all sitting there. We'll find out in a minute. He's teaching in a house. And look what it says. It says, they had come from every village in Galilee. So there's a crowd of people, and they've traveled from all around to be there to hear Jesus. It says also, notice this, from Judea and Jerusalem. That's really interesting. This means people are traveling upwards of 90 miles just to be around Jesus and see what this is about, because the fame of Jesus is starting to spread. He's in this little seashore town of Capernaum. He's teaching. These crowds are coming. They're all around Jesus. And notice what Luke says. He makes a point. And the power of the Lord was with Jesus to heal the sick. So Luke just makes that note. He says it was a special day, right? And you just wonder, like, were some days like more, I don't know, like, did some days like, man, Jesus, man, whoa. Like today, like I could see that with human, but Jesus was human, right? Right, Jeremy? Right? So right? He's just so maybe some days it was like, wow, like, man, that was a crazy day, Jesus. Like, that was a great day at synagogue, whatever, I don't know, right? But I don't know, but the text says on that particular day, like the power of the Lord was with Jesus to heal the sick. So what happens? Well, here's what happens. It says some men came carrying a paralyzed man on a mat. And they tried to take him into the house to lay him before Jesus. So I want us to picture this, right? You got these guys. Mark tells us it's 4 guys. The Gospel of Mark, his detail is it's four guys. And so they have been carrying this guy. I don't know how long. I don't know what city they came from. But they've been carrying this guy. We're going to call him Bob, okay? They've been carrying Bob. And they're carrying him on this mat to meet Jesus, okay? And I don't know, let's just have a couple guys. We have Noah, we have Jacob. I'm picking some Jewish names, I don't know. We have, Israel, there's a good name, right? And then, I don't know, maybe Simeon or something, or Simon, I don't know, okay? So these 4 guys, they're carrying Bob, and they're going, and I don't know, Simeon, he sees this crowd, and he's like, oh, man, telling you, man, Bob, I just know you need to get in there. This guy, Jesus, is somebody special. Like, I have seen what he's done. In fact, I tell you what he's done in my life. Like, I'm telling you, Bob, you've got to get in there. So they're getting there and they hit this obstacle. And the obstacle is, man, there is no way in. In fact, the next verse says it, verse 19. It says, when they could not find a way because of the crowd into the house, I'm going to say it. Simeon comes up with this idea. I don't know. One of them does. It's probably not Bob. I'll just tell you that. Right? Simeon's like, hey, I got an idea. Get a rope. Bob's like, well, what's the rope for? You'll see. We're going to tie him down on this mat, and we're going to carry Bob up the ladder to the top of this house. And I just really want you to picture the conversation. I want you to picture, you better not drop me, right? Can you imagine what they're saying, right? Like, this is happening. All three synoptics, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, all record this story. This happened, guys. And so they're like, okay, let's get him up. Or I don't know if they pulled him up. I don't know if they used a pulley system. I don't know if I don't know what they did. I have no idea. But somehow they get poor Bob up on this mat, up on top of this roof. And there's a crowd of people. I'm sure there's people like, what are you guys doing? Whatever. I don't know whose house this is. But one of those boys, I'm going to go with Noah, he starts digging. He's like, my great-grandpa was good at building. I'll be good at unbuilding. So he starts ripping the roof off of this house. He starts ripping through. In fact, scholars and archaeologists have studied the houses in this part of the world, and they would say that these houses were made of thatched roofs. They have these planks of wood going across the kind of like a basalt made rocky stem walls, but the roof would be these planks, and then they'd put grass and they'd throw mud on there, and they'd have it so basically they're just kind of ripping all that earth material apart. Can you picture Jesus? He's in there teaching. And who knows what his sermon is today? It's probably something like, love your enemies. Hey, Republicans, love those Democrats. Hey, Democrats, man, love the Republicans. Do good to those that curse you. It's probably something like that. Got really quiet on that illustration, by the way. I'm sure it was something like that. Don't go first, go last. Wash each other's feet. If you want to be first in my kingdom, you're going to be the servant or something. I don't know what the sermon was, but here's what I know happened. Somewhere mid-sermon, the dirt starts to fall from the sky. And all of a sudden, there's the first kind of, and then all of a sudden, maybe there's these windows. I picture a window with the sun streaming in, and all of a sudden, you just see the dust starting to scatter in there, and all of a sudden, you look up, and what? And then the first beam of sunlight, hits through the new skylight that's just been installed in the room, right? And there's Noah, he's looking down. Okay, yeah, bring Bob over, Can you picture this, you guys, right? And look at the next. They interrupt Jesus' sermon, and he's so mad that they did that. Is that what this next verse says? He's so upset that they stopped him mid-sentence. No, look what it says. When Jesus saw their faith, he said, hey, friend. Yeah, friend. Did you just see that? I don't know why Luke is the only one that says that. The other texts say, he says, son. I don't know why Luke just chose to say friend. Bob needed to know maybe at the bottom of that rope was a friend. And he looks right at him. And he says, your sins are aphesis, released. I'm releasing you. Now, Bob didn't show up to have his sins released. He showed up to get his physical body healed, right? That's why he's there. He's not there for sins and stuff. He's there for paralysis, right? That's why he's there. So why is it that Jesus talks about these sins that need released. Why does Jesus go here when that's not what he's there for? In fact, I think I want to make an observation that you can see here. What Jesus says is really interesting because he says this to the whole group, all four of them, or five if you count Bob here. He looks at the whole group of them and he says, guys, I'm seeing your faith. Collectively, all of you are showing faith. And notice what Jeremy was preaching last week is that we could tend to privatize faith and keep faith kind of invisible and to ourselves, but that's not true faith. See, true faith always shows up in real action. True faith is always made visible by what you do because of what you believe. Are you hearing me this morning? These guys had true faith because it compelled them to dig the top of a roof and to bring Bob down through the middle because true faith is always going to show up. And Jesus is going to do something very similar. He's going to forgive sins, but he's going to do it in a visible way. He's going to take the invisible sins and show visible healing and visible forgiveness by doing something powerful. Look at the very next thing that Jesus does. Look what he says. It says, so the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, they begin to think within themselves. When Jesus says this thing about your sins are released, like they're saying to him, like, who is this guy? That speaks this kind of blasphemy. Like, how can somebody, a man, forgive sins? Only God can do that. Like, what is this guy thinking about himself that he would say that? Like, that's not even right. That's treading on what God's responsible for. And so it's interesting. The text says Jesus knows what they're thinking. I love that. He's like, I know exactly what you're thinking right now. You're thinking all this. So why are you thinking these things in your heart? And in fact, he says this, what's easier to say? Your sins are forgiven, or to get up and walk? Well, I think it's easier to say your sins are forgiven. Because I don't know about you, but I wouldn't dare tell a paralyzed person to get up and walk. I just couldn't do that. And then Jesus, boom. But I want you to know the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. And then he says to the paralyzed man, I tell you, get up, take your mat, and go home. Guys, that right there is recovery. That right there, he released him of his sins, and then he recovered him of his physical ailment. He took the invisible sins that were crippling and oppressing this man, and he showed visible healing, that invisible forgiveness actually took place. He made the invisible visible by his declaration that his sins were forgiven and his paralysis was healed. Guys, I think that's exactly what Jesus is calling us to. Jesus is calling us into that same commission to help people find recovery and release, to find release from their sins and recovery from the oppression of their sins. I think that's exactly a beautiful picture of this amazing portrait of the gospel that looks at the whole person. Look what it says next. It says immediately he stood up. This guy stood up. I mean, Bob, he stood up. And he starts to like, whoa. I mean, I'm sure he's racing Noah to the corner after that's over, right? He's like, dude, look what I can do now. Look what happened. Look at this life change that happened to me because I met Jesus. And the whole crowd's like, wow. You know, I've often thought about what is the thing that brings me the most joy in life? Is it making money? Is it, having a moment with maybe my family somewhere and there's joys in those things? But guys, I think one of the things that bring more joy than anything else in my whole life, it's carrying a corner on a mat, helping somebody meet Jesus. I think there is something so joyful in helping someone come to Jesus. I remember, I kind of picked on Chris. I'll pick on my kid here because he's right there and I can pick on Chris. I remember when Chris first came to our school. I was a teacher here. And Chris came and he'd just come from some deep trauma in his family, some deep things that happened, some heartbreaking things. And he came to our school. And one of the first guys on the corner of Chris's mat was a guy named Billy Combs. Billy Combs saw Chris. He was really small, really short. Can't even picture that. He had a crazy growth spurt. We'll get into that later. But I mean, and he was this really, really small little middle school kid, I think a sixth grader. And Billy Combs was one of the first one to pick up the corner on his mat. Billy would just mentor him, invite him over with a group of kids, and he'd just hang out with Chris and made Chris feel welcomed and right away. Another guy on the other corner with Jeff Newton, because Chris wanted to play sports, even though he was severely undersized to do that, right? And Jeff Newton, he grabbed the other corner. And then at some point, I was able to grab one of the corners. I think my mom grabbed a corner, several other people, guys, and we carried Chris to Jesus. Guys, guess what? Guess who's helping carry corners today? Chris. He's helping me carry corners now. That's what happens, right? I had lunch the other day with Todd, and Todd was, or breakfast, and Todd wanted to share because he's actually sharing for men's breakfast on October 4th. And so if you're a man, you need to come here to men's breakfast October 4th because Todd is going to share some of his story. And he and I were talking through it, and he says, before I start, Brad, I just want to tell you of the impact you've had on my life. And I'm like, oh man, Todd. He goes, no, you don't understand. I was an atheist when I came to this church. Now, I might be one of the guys on the corner, but I know who the real guys on the corner for Todd are. They're guys like Adrian, Nick, Anthony, Mike. A whole group of those guys are on the corners bringing Todd to Jesus. And when Todd got baptized, brother, that was a celebration. Sometimes you'll see two people, maybe three people helping baptize someone. Why? Because they're all on the corner for that guy getting him into the water. Can you hear me this morning? There's nothing better than being on a corner helping someone come to Jesus. Guys, here's the title of today's message: Carry Your Corner. Man, you've got a corner to carry for someone. I've got a corner to carry for someone. Whose corner are you carrying? Who are you bringing to Jesus? Yes, the world is hurting and it seems dark and you can feel discouraged. And you can look on social media or the news and you say, why bother? That is exactly what the enemy says. No, bring someone to Jesus. Who are those 8 to 15 people in your life that are depending on you to pick up the corner for them, to be one of the ones carrying their mat? Let me ask you a different question. Who carried your mat? I want you to think about that person right now. Because if you know Jesus, I guarantee you somebody helped carry your mat to Jesus. Somebody helped carry you into the kingdom. I know that happened. Whose corner are you carrying? You know, we talked about the world and the darkness of this world. I want to talk about our hometown for a second as we end today. I want to talk about Henderson. This is where we live, guys. Notice this, put this map up there. In this little map, there's the "you are here" thing. Don't you like that? Here's the circle, right? That's us. Guys, check this out. This is some sobering statistics. 3 Square tells us that 1 out of 3 children in that circle are going to bed hungry at night. This is not happening in California somewhere or New York. This is happening in 89015, right here. 85% of the people in that circle are below the poverty line. They struggle with homeless or home security. They struggle with food security. I was talking to Father Moran, and he pastors St. Paul's Charismatic Episcopal Church right by on Taylor Street. I love this man. Right by Albertsons. And he said, I was asking about a lot of this because he does a 3 Square drop in his head. We're going to do a lot with it. Anyway, I'll get on that later. Okay, I love that man. He says, Brad, he said, I swing by the church before I went to school or to work today. And I just happened to see one of my middle school girls walking past. I rolled down the window. I said, hey, and talked to her. But Brad, I noticed her clothes. Her jeans were so dirty. I could barely notice what she was saying. And I'm thinking, here's a middle school girl going to school with filthy clothes because that's the only pair of pants that she has. That's not happening somewhere in some other town. That's happening a stone's throw from here, right? Like that's the city that you and I live by. We walk past these kids. Look at this next step. In the United States, hit this next one for me. 40% of the high school kids in this generation report persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness. So if you see a high school kid, you can bet that they're struggling with some sort of depression. You can look at all over why is there a revival happening? Why do I think the Spirit's moving? Because I think the darkness is so dark that people are really starting to see, I need the light. And this is a moment for the church, guys. We've never had this much depression, this much hopelessness. Pornography, look at the stat on pornography. 50 to 75, now this is just one. I could have used so many examples here. The rise of marijuana use, the rise of abuse of alcohol. Guys, all the escape behaviors and the numbing patterns that our friends and our neighbors, the people in our world are suffering with. They need the freedom from their oppression. They need the chain breaker, man. They need the prison freer. They need the King of Kings. They need the Lamb of God. Can I get some amens in here? They need Jesus. They need Jesus, guys. They need Jesus. What if we saw ourselves as ministers of recovery and release? What if we said, you know what? I need to grab a corner. And I'm going to work. I'm going to ask God, what is it? Where can I be? What ministry can I be a part of that's doing something to solve these problems? What ministries of release and recovery can I be a part of? Maybe it's the Alpha ministry. That's a beautiful ministry that we're going to have another Alpha starting in the fall. Maybe that's what you want to do. You want to sign up to be a part of the Alpha ministry that helps people have conversations about life, faith, and meaning from a Christian point of view in a very non-threatening environment. Maybe that's your cup of tea. Maybe that's what you would like to be. That's beautiful. That's a lot of release ministry. That's the initial evangelism. Or maybe you're more on the recovery side, and after someone comes to Jesus, you want to be part of that training and help them walk with Jesus, right? Maybe you want to be a part of what we want to start in the next year, I'm praying, is something called Regen, which is a very aggressive 12-step discipleship program that helps people find freedom in Jesus and walk with him forever in an incredibly new life. Guys, this is just one of whatever else God wants to launch through our city. And a couple of weeks ago, I threw a pretty, scary list of things on this board, things that I pray God can do through the church at Lake Mead. Because, guys, this is why we're not settling to just stay in this, lunchroom. The reason why we could be comfortable in this place and just stay here until Jesus comes. No, we are going to break down the walls, man. We're going to rip some roofs apart. We're going to move to a new building, even though it's expensive and difficult. And how are we going to do it? It's going to take giant faith to do it. Why? Because we believe that Henderson needs a hospital and a health club, a triage center and a training ground, things that we can't even do in this place that we wanted to do for many years, we want to do finally in this new location. That's why this is important. And so I love the name His House. I want to put one more graphic up. Look what His House. And I want us to all say this together. A house of, let's go, worship, prayer, hope, healing. Let me hear you. Miracles, freedom, recovery. I messed it up. How about this? A house where everyone carries a corner. How cool would that be? And you're like, I hope Pastor Brad does not mess it up because I got my friend here today and it's going to be really embarrassing. You ever done that? You bring someone to church and you're like, I hope nobody does anything weird today, right? You got that anxiety, like I hope they just are normal as much as possible, right? Why? Because you're carrying a corner. Because you know it's fragile. Because you don't want them to miss Jesus. Man, that's what we're called to. I cannot change the world, but I can be a part of changing mine because Jesus is calling me to mine. So I want us right now, as we end today, I want us to think about what's our next step. Everyone in here has one. Everyone has one. Maybe for some of you, your next step really has been rolling around in your mind. I had a man come to me at the first service, and he says, ever since the shooting, I've been deeply reflecting on my life. And I think I need to give my life to Jesus. He told me that before any preaching happened. He says, I think I need to give my life to Jesus. Maybe that's your story right now. Maybe you're on that mat. Maybe there's been people carrying you to Jesus and you're finally in front of Jesus. You're really staring him eyes to eyes. And you hear, friend, your faith has saved you. If you could just bow your heads and close your eyes for a moment. I want us to have a moment with Jesus. And maybe that's you, right where you are. And the darkness of the world is just like, is there hope? It seems so hopeless. And the answer is yes, there is hope. Jesus went through the darkness and out the other side. He took the bullet. He took the nails. He took our place. Jesus died on the cross and he was raised again in victory. There is hope. Do not let the enemy win that battle in your mind that there's no hope. There is hope. His name is Jesus. Right where you sit, right now, you have an opportunity to give your life to Jesus. I want you to imagine Jesus and you having a moment where you've been brought right before him. And he asks, what do you want? What do you want me to do for you? And here's your answer. I want you to forgive me. I'm oppressed by sin. It's crushing me. My choices, other people's choices, my life is crushed. Right where you sit, right where you are. Come to the chain breaker. Come to the one who sets prisoners free. And you pray this to Jesus right there. Jesus, set me free. Just ask him. I give you my life. I believe you died on the cross and you broke the power of sin. And I want to follow you out of this slavery, out of this prison. I want to follow you into freedom. God, I give you my life. Jesus, you're the king now of my life. You pray that prayer. Pray that to Jesus. I believe you died and you rose from the dead. And I give you my life. If that's you this morning, I want you to raise your hand and say, that was me. I gave my life. I am not ashamed of that. I give my life to Jesus right now. Raise your hand up really high so I can see it. I'm giving my life. I see hands all over. If that is you, truly, guys, and you're not ashamed of Jesus, just like in the story, the invisible sins were forgiven and the visible healing showed that. Here's your visible sign. You get baptized. If you're truly serious, you get baptized. That is going to be the visible sign that you gave your life to Jesus. There's going to be a baptism soon. As soon as this service is over, I'm asking you as your pastor, you go to that connection hub in the lobby and you sign up, say, I am not ashamed of Jesus. I'm going to get baptized. I give my life to him.